I'm Ben Goodwin. I'm a sergeant for the Down East District, and this is going to be a presentation for Forest Friday for Christmas trees and wreath brush laws. So like I said, I'm the sergeant for the Down East District, which we have a lot of wreath makers down in the area, so we deal with the tipping a lot. Not so much the Christmas tree side of it, but we do have a lot of tipping violations that we deal with, tipping issues. So this is something that we'll go through. And like I said, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to jump in or raise your hand. So a little bit about us is the Maine Forest Rangers. Wildfire control is our main purpose to, protect the natural resources of Maine. We enforce the laws, natural resource law enforcement, and incident management for disaster response. We have 48 field rangers, 8 district rangers statewide. We have the final on-site responsibility and authorized authority for wildfires throughout the state. And again, we do law enforcement on other burning violations, forest fires, and some timber harvest laws that we also. So a little bit about Maine forestry and the Christmas tree. Maine forestry, the economic impact of the industry, Maine forest industry, is about $8 billion. It and wreath. Sorry about that. Wreath and Christmas trees play a large part in that. We have a large wreath manufacturers down in that Down East district, and they ship wreaths all over the world, actually. So it's a big part of that economic impact that forestry has for the state of Maine. In Maine, millions of wreaths are made each year, like I said, and they're shipped all over the country and also the world. The wreaths are usually made balsam fir tips. Balsam fir is used because it is plentiful in Maine. Also an easy material to make wreaths with. The demand for balsam fir wreaths has risen throughout the years, which has resulted in increased demand for balsam fir tips in our area and also in other locations. There's been such a demand for the last few years. They're bringing in tips from Canada to help with a shortage that we've been having here in Maine, so they can create all the wreaths that they need to send out. So a little on tipping. When we talk about a tip, the tip is the end portion of the balsam fir branch. The length usually ranges around 12 to 20 inches. The tips can be broken into 2 or 3 pieces. These pieces are placed together from the tip bunch and wired into a ring to make the wreath. Tips can be harvested only during late fall after the needles are set. At this time, the balsam fir tree stops growing and stays dormant until spring. Balsam fir tips would lose their needles in a very short time if harvested before this stage. So it is very important that the tip harvester knows when this change occurs. Some tip harvesters have ruined many stacks of tips because they unknowingly gather the tips before the change. So some of the key points on this is it has to get cold for these needles to settle in. We usually, down in our Down East district where tipping is a major thing going on down there, Usually they start at the beginning of November after a couple hard frosts, and those tips really settle into the branch and set in. So we'll start seeing, probably in another week or so, week or two, we'll start seeing people out there getting tips. So with those wreath producers, like I said, down east, they're pretty particular on the selection of tips they buy. They're looking for top quality on those tips to make the wreaths. Tips should be rounded on the end, needles on all sides of the tips and stems. The needles should be dark green in color, not yellow and brown. The tips should have no signs of disease or insect damage. And you can see in the picture here that the tip where she's breaking off, and I'll show you in another slide, is in the middle of the tree, and that's a nice looking tip. It's got the needles all the way around, good green color. Tips are usually harvested from the middle section of the tree, which generally has the best quality tips, rather than from the top or the bottom. The top of the fir tree often includes branches that are too long and the stems are too thick. Usually the tips towards the bottom lose their needles or are broken off and don't make good tips. So to harvest the tips, you would grasp the branch firmly between your thumb, like in the picture here, and your forefingers, and snap it off with a quick downward motion. Generally, those tips are 12 to 20 inches. Just so when they just take the tip, that leaves some of the branch still left on the tree, where that will grow back for future years of tipping, so they can continue to use that year after year. Some of the wreath manufacturers down east, they manage their property for tipping. And if you're ever down in that area, you'll see where they top some of the trees. What this does is it stops the tree growing upwards, and it actually helps it grow outwards where they want that extra growth, so they can pick those tips to produce the wreaths. You will see, especially down in our area, for the companies that manage their property for tipping, they have large crews of people that come in and pick the tips, and they have hundreds of acres just managed just for this tipping, to try to help supply in their wreath making. This is just a picture of a well-rounded tip. You'll see it's got the needles all the way around, and it's just a good look, and it's got good green color. It would make for a good Christmas wreath, or a wreath to be sending out. It's kind of hard to see, but you'll see this is a tip that was taken off probably towards the bottom of the tree. You can see it has a little orange on it. The needles aren't all the way around the branch. So that would be a low quality, and the tip manufacturers, they probably wouldn't even buy this. This is a way, so once the tips are harvested, this is a way folks will carry the tips out of the woods. We see this quite a bit when we're checking people's tips. They'll have a stick, and what they'll do is, sorry about that. They'll have a stick, and what they'll do is gather them on the stick and stack. They'll stack the harvested tips along the tree branch or a tree, usually 4 to 6 feet, and they'll stack them in that location. They'll tie them off at the ends so they can gather it up and carry it out of the woods where they've been tipping. These stacks can range from 50 to 70 pounds, so you can get quite a bit of tips on that stack when they bring it out. On average, I think right now, this time of year, the wreath companies are paying 40 to 50 cents a pound. Last year it was up quite a bit because there was a shortage in tips. So I think last year was 55 or 60 cents per pound is how they buy the tips. This is just someone making a wreath with the tips. So some of the laws on the tipping, I'll just leave that up. Some of the major things that we run into is making sure folks have permission to be on that property. That's something that we run into quite a bit with the large landowners. They have a permit system that they actually will write you a permit, and it's good for the tipping season. It will cover all their land, and with that law that we have, the person has to have the written permission with them, so we know they're allowed to be on that property harvesting those tips. We do see a lot of violations of this down east in our down east district, where some people will just pull over the side of the road, they'll get out and they'll start harvesting tips on someone else's property. So we handle a lot of complaints with that. And also on some of the larger landowners, where crews will come in and do quite a bit of damage on the trees without the permission of the landowners. Transporting the tips, again, the biggest thing here is making sure they have a written permission or a bill of sale where they got those tips or where they harvest them from. So us as the enforcers of this law, we have an understanding of where it came and that they took them legally. And there's also on this next slide, I'll show you here, there's some information on if you're making tips or you're making wreaths and you want to send them out of the state, there is some rules that have to be followed. There are some states you can ship to, some states you cannot ship to. There's also a list of materials that you shouldn't use that could be harmful to people's health. There's the bittersweet and multifloral rose that can be dangerous or is not allowed to be shipped with the wreaths or used in the making of the wreaths. So these are some links that you can go. It's some great information about what you can ship, what you can't ship, where you can ship it. So we don't have any issues if you're looking to ship your wreaths out of state or anywhere else. There's some great resources there. So this would be an example of us with a tipping violation. This was a violation a few years ago where these folks were tipping on a piece of property that they did not have permission to be on. As you can see, there's quite a pile of tips there. What we do is we would find the violators, confiscate the tips. We take the tips to the local tip buyer. We do sell the tips to them, and the landowner gets reimbursed for those tips that were harvested off their property without permission. So the tips don't go to waste, which is good. And then the violation, as you can see on this one, it was quite a bit. So there was a large amount of restitution and fine that went with this. Another example of some confiscated tips that we've come across, and you can see in this back there, these are on those stacks where they've cut trees and stacked the branches up. And like I said earlier, each one of those stacks can range from 50 to 70 pounds. So price-wise, it can add up pretty quick. Another couple truckloads of us confiscating tips where people weren't supposed to be tipping or did not have written permission to be tipping, that we had to confiscate and sell to reimburse the landowner for the damage that was done. Some other violations that we see quite a bit as we're during this tipping season is unlawful cutting of trees. you'll see some folks cut trees to better access into property where they're going to tip. We also see them cutting trees to use to make those stacks. And this can do some real damage to private property and large landowner property that are managing their woods. It can be very, very harmful. Illegal campfires, this is another one. We've been seeing more of this where groups of people will come in to the down east area. They'll find a place to camp out. They'll camp out for 2 or 3 weeks and get tips. So we're seeing a lot of illegal camping, illegal campfires in areas where they shouldn't be, on other people's properties, or campfires left going. Another big one is littering. We see this quite a bit again, as people are coming in, especially with the violations that we find. They're coming into somebody else's property. They don't even have permission to be there, and they're leaving trash or anything else around. Illegal use of ATVs. A lot of folks will come in as they're harvesting these tips with their ATVs and bring their tips out on the ATV to their truck or something out, or they bring their trucks into property where they're not supposed to and cause a lot of damage as they're going through the property without permission. We have some information here. If anybody has a concern about tipping or believe somebody's stealing tips or on property that they're not supposed to, we have the different dispatch numbers here for the southern and western, central and down east and northern Maine. Somebody can call, report that violation, and we will follow up on that. So thank you for listening to the presentation. If you have any questions, this is my email. That is the best way to get a hold of me. Like I said, I'm the sergeant for the Down East District, and tipping is one of the major, this time of year, it is a major process going on down in that area. So if you have any questions, please reach out to me. My email is on there. Does anybody have any questions? Anything to add from anybody?
Ben, this is Robbie Gross. If I'm a new individual that has interest in looking to tip to make my own wreaths, what are some best practices for me to start with that process so I'm doing everything properly?
I think the great question. So the best thing to do is for somebody that wants to make some wreaths just for their own use. The biggest thing is making sure you're getting the tips off property that you have permission to do that for. And you have to have written permission. So if it's on your own property, you're okay. If it's somebody else's property, you want to have them just write you out a kind of like a release form or permission form, just saying, I give so-and-so permission to harvest tips off my property. And then when we check that person tipping, we know they're legally are supposed to be there and they're harvesting the tips legally. Also, if you go back a few slides on the presentation, there is with those informations about if you want to send your wreaths out of state or what to make in your wreaths or things that you should add to your wreaths as decorations or things that you shouldn't that could be dangerous to the health of young children or people in your household. Some of those links at a few slides back will really give great information on that.
Thank you, Ben. And I've got one more question. If I'm a landowner and I have someone approach me about tipping or harvesting Christmas trees on my land. I really don't know a whole lot about the practice. Who can I contact, or how should I go about learning more information concerning tipping?
I think the best one would, you could contact our agency direct, and even those numbers that were posted back a few slides back here, you could call, and if you had a question or concern, they could put you in touch with a forest ranger in your area, and we would be able to answer those questions. Also, my email is on there. If you have questions, you can shoot me an email, and I will give you an answer or find somebody that can give you an answer to that. But I would do say check in with your local forest ranger. We can help you through the whole process, even if you're a landowner or someone that wants to tip on other people's lands. We can help you navigate it so you're not violating any laws or anything. Any other questions? Anything else to add, Chief?
Ben, Kenny Ferguson here. I've been trying to find my contact at the extension service, but there is a specialist that does have a little bit of understanding. Well, not a little bit. He knows wreaths quite well. If I dig it up, I'll send it to you. Sorry, I don't have it right at hand here.
Oh, no, that would be great. That'd be terrific to have. Appreciate that.
Ben, thank you for doing this.
Yes, no problem. And truly, if anybody's got any questions or anything, shoot me an email, give me a call, anything like that. And or if anybody wants to come down and see, we do some training down our way with tipping and tipping laws, or any of the facilities down there where they make the reefs and everything like that. It's a pretty impressive process they have down our way. Well, if there's no more questions, I think I will end the presentation. Thank you very much. I hope everybody has a great Friday.